Good evening. I'm Brent Blackaby. It's my honor to represent you and more than 15,000 people here in Berkeley Hills on the Berkeley City Council. It's so good to be with you tonight to discuss the latest community efforts on wildfire safety here in Berkeley. This is a topic that gets a lot of interest from our neighbors. We had more than 200 people RSVP. We've got almost 100 people online right now. And so we're looking forward to a good discussion, conversation, opportunity to learn about all the work that's going on. And we'll also be sharing a link to the webinar afterwards for people who can't join us tonight. As we all know, we have serious wildfire risk here in our beloved Berkeley Hills, and climate change continues to make that challenge even worse. I want to thank my predecessor, former Councilmember Susan Wengraf, for inspiring District 6 residents to take a proactive approach to fire safety during her 16 years of service, including launching these annual community wildfire updates. So we're building on that legacy as we continue working to keep our neighbors and our community safe from wildfire and educate all of us as we learn more about what we can do. Together as a community, the city, the Park District, PG&E, Berkeley Lab, East Bay Mud, and you, our residents, our friends, our neighbors, will give us the best chance to reduce the impact of a potential future wildfire. So tonight we want to review some of the great work that our partners are doing. There is so much happening beyond what any individual one of us might be doing. There's a lot of work being done by a lot of people, and part of tonight is just to make that more transparent and show you and get you up to speed on all that great work that's happening. So, Colin, if you could put the agenda up, we have a pretty ambitious agenda tonight. So we want to dive right in. We're going to try and cover a lot of ground in about 60 minutes and then leave time at the end for Q&A. If you do have questions, drop them in the Q&A function at the bottom. So we're going to start with a quick situation overview, Berkeley's current fire climate, insights on the evacuation study. We want to hear from our partners. We want to talk about some support that's available to help support fire resiliency. We want to talk a little bit more about Fire Station 4 and the city budget, an update on home insurance and the work that we're doing to help make this more accessible and affordable. We'll get a quick update on the fire code and the work that's being done for the Ember program. And then, like I said, we'll do Q&A at the end and make as much time available to take as many questions as we can during that period. You could definitely ask a question at any time, but hopefully you'll get a lot of those questions answered over the course of the evening. And so you might want to save some of those questions for the end. That's my bit. So now I have the pleasure of introducing a couple of gentlemen who most of you have heard from before, Fire Chief David Sprague and Assistant Fire Chief for the WUI Division, Colin Arnold, who are going to get us started tonight. Thank you so much for being here and for leading us through this part of the presentation.
Hey, Councilmember Blackaby, thank you very much. I appreciate Chief Sprague being here. He's going to be here for the remainder of the meeting in case there's questions that come up tonight that are best suited for him. But I'm going to sort of take the lead on getting you through the first part of this presentation. Really excited, like Councilmember Blackaby said, to have you here tonight. Chief, do you have anything to add before we get going?
Always great to see so many people turn out for this annual event. Really proud of what we're doing. I think we're really making meaningful strides towards reducing the risk that our community faces, and I'm looking forward to Colin and Sarah and the rest of the team presenting tonight. Thanks for being here. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Chief. Before we get into what's happening locally, just sort of a frame of reference for what's going on this season. When we look at our seasonal outlook for 2026, we work pretty closely with CAL FIRE in terms of what we expect for wildfire. And so I'm going to share a couple of technical slides with you, in part just to share some of the considerations that are going into the pre-positioning and pre-planning for this season throughout the state. So as we look forward for wildfire behavior this year and what we expect statewide, there's a couple of key slides that I want to pull in that have been shared not only with all of our local responders, but every responder throughout the state. One is that our seasonal outlook for 2026 demonstrates an expected above average temperature throughout the region. At this point, with climate change, I'm not exactly sure what above average means anymore, but I do know that given the historical average, we do expect higher than average temperatures both here and in other parts of California. There's a couple of really interesting slides here that I think help paint the picture for why we have a heightened sense of awareness this season. I want to share them with you. The first is when we look at fuel moisture level. So one of the things that we look at from a wildfire perspective is the fuel moisture level based on the vegetation models in the region. And we model fuels based on 1,000-hour fuels, 100-hour fuels, 10-hour fuels, and 1-hour fuels. And what that is suggesting is basically how long does it take an average, or how long does it take vegetation to assume the relative humidity of the moisture in the air around it. And so 1,000-hour fuel would be a very large tree. It takes 1,000 hours for a large tree to assume the moisture content of the humidity in the air around it. However, dry grass or small bushes might be 1 or 10-hour fuels. They almost immediately assume the moisture content in the air that surrounds it. We can't really model 1 hour and 10-hour fuels because they change throughout the day, but we can look at 1,000-hour fuels and 100-hour fuels. And one of the things that we're seeing already is that the fuel moisture levels, both for the Bay Marine area and the Diablo and Santa Cruz Mountains, the fuel moisture is already below what we would consider critical fuel moistures for this time of year. So that tells you that because they've got low fuel moisture content, they're more susceptible to ignition. More importantly, when we look at the regional fuel index is the energy release component. And what this is looking at is the amount of available fuel and how likely that fuel is to burn. So if it's been a wet year, as it was this winter, and we think about grass grows, there's been a lot of vegetation that has grown up as a part of that high moisture content, those heavy rains. We've seen more fuels, but they've also then cured out and dried out earlier in the season than we would expect. And so we're seeing energy release components that are already above the critical levels for this time of year and are actually already approaching the critical fuel or energy release components for sometimes June or July at this point. So when we talk about CAL FIRE pre-positioning, when we talk about our readiness for wildfire, one of the things that we're thinking about is the amount or the likelihood of ignitions. For those of you paying attention, in Simi Valley 2 days ago, we had the first regional wildfire down in Southern California. That's early for the season. We had a grass fire here in Berkeley today that had a great initial attack. We had really aggressive crews, and that fire was extinguished. That was down in the flats, by the way. So we're already starting to see some of these ignitions, which is a normal part of our seasonal firefighting response, but they are happening earlier in the season. So the question there is, what do we do with this, and how do we prepare you as a community for the rest of the fire season? I want to introduce Lana, who's done a ton of work with our Office of Emergency Services, both in terms historically of getting us ready for this, but then also I think it has some really interesting things to share about the lessons learned from our past responses and how we're going to approach it this year. And Sarah, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chief. So I just want to start off, for those of you who have heard these concepts before, I'm going to do a little bit of recap. But when we talk about these catastrophic wildfires and getting out of the way of these dangerous fires, we talk a lot about extreme fire weather. And what we need to understand is that looking out the window right now today, we cannot have one of those catastrophic fires occur. The reasoning is related to the weather. So next slide, please. When we think about these catastrophic fires, I have always updated this slide and unfortunately had some more updates in 2025. This picture is from the tunnel fire. What we know is for these fires to actually spread in this really fast way that we're used to seeing requires 3 different things to all come together at the same point. Number 1, super high winds. Number 2, super low humidity. And then number 3, like Chief Arnold was just talking about, super dry fuels. These 3 factors all work in tandem together to create, again, these catastrophic fires that, number 1, we can't use normal firefighting techniques on. So what you'll see is that our first responders really focus in these fires on moving people out of the way, because fighting those fires is a huge challenge. The opportunity, though, that we have here is trying to look for those periods of extreme fire weather where all of these pieces are coming together, because the weather is actually predictable, right? We do weather forecasting all the time, and this weather doesn't come together in this way except for in very rare circumstances. Next slide, please. So what I'm showing you is a chart you may have seen before, but just to quickly review, what this is showing is the National Weather Service's criteria for declaring a red flag warning. And all it's showing is that on the y-axis, you have humidity. Humidity is getting lower as you go down. And then on the x-axis, we have wind speeds. Wind speeds are getting higher as you move over to the right. When the red flag warnings are issued, that's the Weather Service's indication that they expect to see super high wind, or high winds, I should say, and low humidity coming together to create additional fire risk. So what does that mean for us? If you can go to the next slide, please. If we look at those catastrophic fires, and again, we've added the Los Angeles fires and onto this slide now, what we see is that they're all happening not just in a normal red flag warning or middle of the road red flag warning, but down here in the bottom right-hand corner of the chart. And what that's showing us is that we need really high winds and really low humidity to create that catastrophic situation. So back in 2018, when we were looking at how to communicate this risk to our community effectively, next slide, please, we looked at where these fires were occurring and said, okay, if we see a forecast that occurs in any of these boxes, essentially, we're going to tell the community that we have extreme fire weather and that we need to take above and beyond additional protective actions to stay safe, because the normal things that you might do to be ready for a wildfire, just having your phone on and being ready to leave, might not be enough for you to be safe. Next slide, please. So the specific instruction that we had attached to a forecast of extreme fire weather was that community members in the Berkeley Hills should leave early. That's before a fire even starts. And the reasoning for this, again, is that we all know that Berkeley's roadway infrastructure in the hills are not going to support a fast evacuation. And we know that it's really on an individual level, the only way to guarantee your safety in extreme fire weather is not to be in an area where you can't get out quickly. One other idea that has really come to the front since we introduced this concept is the idea that by leaving, you are actually helping to fight the fire. And what I mean by that is that if our firefighters are able to get into the fire area faster and then focus not on doing community rescues and helping community members to evacuate, but rather to focus on protecting those homes that are being threatened, then we have a better chance of getting through the fire safely. I put up this slide of the Kincaid fire that occurred in 2019. And what we saw was that there was a red flag warning issued. And then the people fighting the fire, including the Weather Service watching the weather, saw that they were going to have a period of extreme fire weather. So the weather was bad, but it was going to get even worse. Now, this was after a fire had ignited, so slightly different from the way that Berkeley does it, but they made the decision to go ahead and evacuate 50,000 people ahead of this fire. This was an unprecedented decision. But I have talked to numerous chiefs and firefighters who have responded to this fire, and they said it was like night and day. They were able to get in there and actually protect homes instead of worrying about evacuating all these people. And they were able to have a much more successful result. Next slide, please. So let's bring this back to Berkeley. If you've been here since 2018, then what you've experienced is 3 separate times that the Berkeley Fire Department declared extreme fire weather: in 2019, in 2020, and again in 2024. Now, here are the things we noticed from these experiences. Number one, those forecasts of extreme fire weather didn't actually occur. The weather didn't occur. And we saw that people weren't actually going outside and seeing those extreme winds and that extremely low humidity like we were talking about. We did see that PG&E, as a protective action, was turning off power to community members in some parts of Berkeley as part of their public safety power shutoff program. And we also saw in 2024 that although we didn't have any fires ignite here in Berkeley, Oakland had the Keller fire. This photo on the right is from the Keller fire. As part of that fire, it got into the trees behind a residential area, and 500 people were evacuated. And the reason that I'm bringing this up is because we still had hazardous fire weather, even though it did not reach those extreme levels. And this demonstrates that. Now, what we saw from our own community members was that many people did leave the Berkeley Hills early and stay elsewhere per the recommendation. We also saw that a number of community members and households packed their cars and got ready, but said, you know what, I want to watch the fire weather. And then if I see that the fire weather, the winds really kick up and the humidity really drops, then we're going to go. So people were taking protective actions, even if they weren't fully leaving the Berkeley Hills, which is another great step. Next slide, please. So we are updating our approach to extreme fire weather. Number one, we are making the forecast harder. I should say in 2018, the forecast of extreme fire weather meant that fire weather was possible. In 2026, if we declare extreme fire weather, that means we have a slam dunk forecast from the National Weather Service, and you are 100% going to see very dangerous fire weather. Next change that's going to influence is going to be that our experience so far has been that we're doing extreme fire weather about every few years. Because it's going to be harder to meet these thresholds, we have, according to the Weather Service, less than 5% annually of a chance that we will be declaring extreme fire weather. So you'll see it happen less frequently. And then the area that we are asking to actually leave early is going to change from the entire Berkeley Hills area to more targeted evacuation zones. Next slide. So just to visualize some of this for you, when we're talking about those thresholds, I'm bringing back that same chart from a couple slides ago. We're pushing things in. So the winds are going to have to be forecasted to be even faster, and the humidity is going to be forecasted to be even lower before it meets these thresholds. Next slide. And what it's going to look like is a lot more like this. Now, I want to be cautioning you that like Chief Arnold mentioned, the three pieces of fire weather are wind, humidity, and also fuel moisture and fuel dryness. This chart does not show that fuel dryness piece of the equation, but this is going to be guiding our decision making. Next slide, please. In addition to the change to the thresholds, I mentioned a change to the geography and the areas of people that we are recommending leave early versus take other steps. What you can see here on the right, and we'll send out after this training more information so you can find exactly where you are. But what you see on the right is the Berkeley Hills, the area that is toward the east of the Berkeley Hills and closest to the park is still in the leave early zone. We are now defining those leave early areas using the evacuation zones that we would be using in an actual evacuation. You can see those leave early zones in orange and listed on the left. Now, the zones that are further downhill, we are now calling get ready zones. When we have extreme fire weather, the recommendation for people in these zones is going to be pack up and be ready to leave at a moment's notice, because you might not have more than a moment's notice. In addition, for people in this gray area, the recommendation is going to be that if you have other extenuating circumstances that would make it harder to evacuate, for example, if you live on a street that has one way in and one way out, or if you need help from outside of your household to be able to successfully evacuate, then you should consider extreme fire weather to be your trigger to leave early. Next slide. I also wanted to touch briefly on some of the things that we learned from the evacuation study, which we completed last year. And the study was, next slide, please, really looking at two things. Number one, how fast does it take people to move out of harm's way under different scenarios, day, night, weekend, weekday, different seasons, things like that. And then number two, how fast would a hazard move? Looking at those two pieces of information together, we can understand how safe community members will be in an evacuation. So for a fire, when we're talking about how fast a hazard would move, we're talking about how quickly could a fire spread. And what we learned from this study was not a surprise to any of us, and probably isn't a surprise to any of you on this call either. It was that a fast-moving fire could overtake people who are still stuck in traffic. Reasoning for this is that we have unpredictable fire spread, can't say exactly where it will go and how fast. Of course, we know that we have poor roadway capacity in the Berkeley Hills. And in addition to that, any ability to provide evacuation support via mass transportation is really not likely in a Berkeley Hills evacuation. Next slide. Here is the good news that we got out of the evacuation study. I think we, along with probably many of you, had thought about evacuation as starting when you get in your car and try to leave. The entire conversation has been about how do we navigate the roadways quickly. What the experts who worked on the evacuation study with us really encouraged us to do was to stop the way that we were thinking about evacuation and change the paradigm to first start with getting the evacuation alert and knowing that you need to take action. And then adding into that the time that it takes your household to be ready to leave, as well as that time that it takes to escape the hazard area. It's really important that we focus on those first two steps. Number one, because these are the areas where you in your household can make plans that will vastly shorten the overall evacuation time that your household has. And this can actually, shortening the time that it takes you to receive an alert and the time it takes you to get ready to leave, can get you on the roadway faster. And if you are on the roadway faster, you are going to encounter less traffic. So overall, your evacuation time will be faster. Next slide. So the main recommendations that we have for you to shorten that overall evacuation time are, number one, to sign up for the Genesis Protect app. So Genesis Protect is displayed here on the right side of your screen. It is a map of Berkeley that breaks everything into zones. It extends throughout California. And this system is what's used by our fire chiefs during a wildfire evacuation. And this will be the system that they first change to tell everybody that an evacuation is ordered for a certain area. If you download this app and sign up for your own evacuation zone, which you can find if you go on the website and just search for your address, then you will be notified if your zone status changes to evacuation warning or to evacuation order. This will be the fastest way for you to know that you need to take protective action. Next slide. The next system that we have, you all know about, it's AC Alert, the Alameda County Mass Notification System. If you have a cell phone or email address, we really want you to sign it up for this system so that we have more ways of reaching you with these protective action instructions. Final reminder here is that when we have fire weather, we need you to leave your phone on. Do not use the Do Not Disturb feature, because if we can't reach you, then we cannot alert you. Next slide. The last piece that I'm super excited about is that we have just within the last couple of days finalized updates to a fire planning, evacuation planning worksheet that we will send out after this presentation. But this worksheet is all about that second step of your evacuation process. If you have a plan, if you know ahead of time where you are planning to go when you evacuate, if you know ahead of time what your 2 routes out of your neighborhood are. If you ahead of time have had conversations with your neighbors about how you can help each other out, and if you have thought ahead of time about how you are going to respond for a red flag warning versus for extreme fire weather, then when those situations come up, you are going to be able to act with muscle memory because you have already made all of the decisions that you need to in order to move quickly. And doing this planning process that's guided through these worksheets, which are much simpler than the old version, is going to shorten that evacuation time for you. So thank you. And I will turn it back over to Chief Arnold to talk a little bit more about key partnerships in evacuation and fire readiness.
Thanks, Sarah. I can't say enough about what Sarah does with our organization. Lives are hands down the most important factor when it comes to wildfire and preventing loss. And what Sarah and the OAS team does is remarkable. I think we're leading the county and leading the state in a lot of ways in terms of how we're approaching some of these challenges, and it's an amazing thing to watch. So. If you haven't already signed up for AC Alert and Genesis Protect, if you haven't visited the website, please do. It's a great resource, and obviously getting you all out safely is our number 1 priority. We're going to shift this back to preparedness for a little bit and what some of our partners are doing. I'm going to talk briefly about what's happening in East Bay Regional Parks, especially in Tilden Park. We talked with Chief Haley over in East Bay Regional Parks earlier this week to get an update, and then I'll turn it back over to Councilmember Blackaby to talk about some of the other partners. Here in East Bay Regional Parks, for those of you paying attention, I don't think anybody smelled smoke the other day. I was actually quite impressed with the way they picked the weather conditions, but they were conducting pile burns late or maybe 2 weeks ago now, right off at the base of Sunset and Wildcat Canyon Road. They've removed quite a bit of hazardous vegetation in terms of those 10-hour fuels that we talked about, so your woody material. And then they've got the goats coming in, I believe, starting next week or the week after that to do some of the light flashy 1-hour fuels, the grasses. They've already mowed down some of the grasses along Wildcat Canyon Road. So happening right now, there's a bunch of work happening around the merry-go-round, out around the Brazil Room. For those of you that have driven down near the Brazil Room, you can now see Lake Anza this year for the first time in a long time, which is a sign that they've removed a lot of those ladder fuels, a lot of those low ground fuels, and fuels that'll help you get up or help fire get up into the canopy of some of the trees down there. So that actually does a remarkable amount of work in terms of preventing fire spread from getting up into the canopy of trees. They have divided a lot of their work into different tiles within Tilden. So this year we're going to see work occurring in all of these tiles up in the upper left throughout Tilden Park, so right up against our boundary. And what that's going to look like this year is a total of 220 acres being treated. They're leveraging $6.33 million of grant funds. You can see the breakdown there about where those funds are going. They are starting some tree removal and thinning projects over by the merry-go-round later this year, and as well as down by, they've done a bunch of work down by the Little Farm. They're going to do a bunch more work towards the end of the year. I am not doing justice to the work that they're actually going to conduct, but they will do justice to that work next week at a webinar that they're hosting on the 27th between 12 and 1. You can sign up for that webinar using the QR link here in this presentation, and we will also make sure that that QR link is available afterwards. And I believe that's also going to be recorded. So great work going on from their side. And then Councilmember Blackaby, I'm going to turn it back over to you just to introduce our next speaker.
Great. Thanks, Chief Arnold, for all the information about fire weather evacuation and talking about the Park District. The Park District, as we all know, it's an important partner. That's one that we think about every day. I think the other partner that we think about quite often is PG&E power lines. We all have real concerns about that, and understanding more of the work they're doing is important. I also want to give them a quick shout out. We'll be talking about the Berkeley Fire Safety Council, who's another one of our key partners shortly. But PG&E has been a financial supporter and a financial partner as well. They've contributed more than $400,000 in grants to help the Berkeley Fire Safety Council remove blue gum eucalyptus and help with restoration efforts. So they're a financial partner but they're also an operational partner. So I'm really pleased tonight that we have Barry Stallard from PG&E to present sort of an update on what PG&E is up to. He's a wildfire operations senior public safety specialist, and we really look forward to your update. Thanks, Barry, for being here.
Thank you for having me. Next slide, please. So good evening, everyone. My name is Barry Stallard, and I work for PG&E. I've been with the company for 7 years. My original background is with San Jose Fire Department for 30 years, a retired chief officer. But focus specifically on PG&E right now and what things have been done specific to Berkeley Hills. As a council member mentioned, we have donated. We provided grant funding to assist with tree removal, brush removal along the roadways to help eliminate those fuels, those possibilities of something along the side of the road that could potentially ignite. We're working on additional aspects of community hardening, which I'll get into when I get to one of my later slides. So next slide, please. Okay, so vegetation management is something we pursue aggressively. We do inspections on a daily basis. We've completed 700 miles of inspections so far this year, and we'll easily reach a couple of thousand by the end of the year. And we've trimmed away 3,000 trees, trimmed and or removed. And in your area specifically, excuse me for the typo, it says 17,000, but it's 1,700 trees in the Berkeley Oakland Hills that have been trimmed and removed. As mentioned by your fire department representatives, removal of that fuel load, dead fuel, live fuel load, it makes a tremendous difference in your ability to evacuate and also eliminates the amount of fuel that can burn in the event of an ignition. Next slide, please. So we have done some undergrounding in your area. We've completed 2 miles in your area, and excuse me, we've completed 1 mile, but we want to continue to move forward with the limited projection. I know you have another project that's ongoing. Oh my God. I know you have another project that's ongoing with undergrounding that's going to underground, that's going to affect 78 properties in your area. But other than that, we don't have additional projections for undergrounding for the hills, at least not this year. Next slide, please. So some of the things that we're doing that are really that are a tremendous help is we have high definition cameras throughout PG&E's service territory. In your area specifically, there are 6, and you can see that there are little blue arrow points in different directions. However, if an ignition occurs, those cameras can be repositioned so that the people that are analysts and our hazard awareness center, they can reposition the camera so they can get a better look on what is happening with that particular fire. And you as homeowners and residents can also get on the website to take a look and see what's going on with those cameras, to see what's going on with fires in your particular area. You do not have the ability to reposition them. Only our analysts can reposition those cameras, but at the very least, you can get a good picture. Also mounted to those cameras are AI or detection software, so that if our analyst happens to be looking in a different direction or available or busy with something else, this camera, the AI, will ping an incident that's starting to happen. And one of our hazard awareness center analysts will look at that, analyze to see what kind of fire is it. Is it just a spark? Is it a car fire? Is it grass fire, structure fire? We'll also have the ability to contact the area having jurisdiction, specifically Berkeley Fire in this case, and we would notify them this is what we're seeing. Their people may have already gotten a detection, maybe not, but just the same, you have additional layers of people that are looking at these assets to make sure that we can catch a fire early before it spreads. So we're trying to, or what we've done is eliminate the hope that a passerby will happen to see that fire, something more common that would happen during daytime hours. However, at 10, 11, 2 o'clock in the morning, there's not necessarily someone's going to see it until it's actually grown to a much larger size. So we have a center called, yeah, go ahead and change. It's the third bullet point down. We have the PG&E Hazard Awareness Warning Center, also known as the Hawk. So we have people 24 hours a day that are monitoring these cameras. They're monitoring Alert California. They're monitoring watch duty, radio traffic, 24 hours a day. And they're trying to be also a part of that early warning so that we can catch a fire early, notify the area having jurisdiction, get resources there much faster to eliminate the spread of the fire. And that notifying someone could be Berkeley Fire, Oakland Fire, Cal Fire, whomever is involved. But we really want to make sure we get those resources there. At the top, you see in the bullet point, it says it's 1,555 high-def cameras. And all of them have AI mounted to them. So we've really come a long way in the last 7 years to make sure that we have access to something where we can get eyes on these fires very quickly. We employ some technology called TechnoSilva, which will also give us details on what the fire might do on a given day, certain temperatures, certain RH, in a location, knowing the fuel weather and topography, and it will give us the potential for the spread of that fire. So we can help the fire department, or they also use this. Some fire departments also use this, but it gives them a bird's eye view, if you will, what they might anticipate in the event of a fire. The fourth bullet point is PG&E has what's called a safety and infrastructure protection team that I worked with for 3.5 years. And it's basically Type 6 engines, 46 Type 6 engines spread throughout the PG&E service territory. But specific to the Bay, there are 4 of those rigs. And those rigs are also available for structured protection, but they're primarily there to protect PG&E assets, to eliminate those assets from becoming more of the problem in the event of a fire. Of course, we have to work with the area having jurisdiction to get permission to go into the fire footprint so that we don't put ourselves at risk unnecessarily and create more work for, in this case, Berkeley Fire Department. But everyone that staffs those engines are all former firefighters from throughout the service territory. They worked for CAL FIRE, local jurisdictions, and they also work for the Forest Service. We have vegetation management teams that are constantly inspecting and trimming and cutting away excess vegetation. We do that throughout the territory, but we also have someone that is specific to the East Bay. So your area is being constantly managed as well as other areas throughout the territory. We understand the value of eliminating excess fuel, dead trees, live trees that need to be trimmed back, vegetation needs to be cut away from the roadway. And we work very closely with the cities and counties to make sure that we can be a part of that success. Some of the other items that you may have experienced, we talked about PSPSs, but something that is often mistaken for a PSPS is we have what is called enhanced power safety settings. The beauty of this device is, and let's see if I can explain this. Under normal circumstances, if a tree branch or a bird or something falls on one of the conductors or wires, as you may call them, it would ignite, kill the bird, if you will. Bird bursts into a ball of fire, falls to the fuel bed, ignites the fuel bed, and now we have a fire. Well, with enhanced power safety settings, it shuts off the power to that conductor within 1/10 of a second or less. The bird still dies. Unfortunately, that's still a lot of electricity that pulses through at 186,000 miles per second, but the bird doesn't ignite. It may smolder and falls to the ground, and now it's not on fire, so it does not cause that fire. We also use applications like Watch Duty Pro, which all of you can join if you'd like. It's a relatively inexpensive membership fee, and it also has all the cameras that I'm speaking about. They're all on there. It also has some PG&E assets and things of that sort. We also monitor pulse point and broadcastify, so we can listen to radio traffic and of all the areas having jurisdiction. And one of the biggest things that we released, and it's pretty exciting to me coming from a profession where we get a lot of reaction, and this is prevention. Continuous monitoring system. And they just released this notification to us last week. And I'm going to read a few things that are on that encompassed in the continuous monitoring. We have early fault detection sensors. We have grid scope devices, down conductor detection, smart detect, distribution fault anticipation sensors, line sensors, grid data analytics, and technology platform. Lori's going to post all of this information regarding this continuous monitoring so that you can read all of the details of this. But in one big ball of wax, all of these things are preventative. So what they've done is they prevented 1,500 fires or shorts or conductors falling because the computer, the machine learning, if you will, recognizes patterns of what's going on as the electricity is flowing through the conductors. Because we do have people 24 hours a day monitoring what's going on with our system. Unlike before the wildfires and also before San Bruno, we've stood up monitoring centers with people that are monitoring those things 24 hours a day. So as it recognizes certain things, instead of a troubleshooter having to wait for a conductor to fall to the ground and then have to receive phone calls, and then that troubleshooter responds to the area, patrols the circuit, hoping to locate the outage or will locate the source of the outage. This machine learning, this technology allows us to go to the exact location of the fault, and even more so to this fault or to where the problem might start to exist before it actually becomes a broken conductor and something that potentially ignites the fuel bed. So we're really excited with what's going on with this. PG&E has become one of the leading, actually the leading utility company when it comes to all of this. We actually have conferences with all the other utility companies so we can share what we're doing, and anything they have, everyone is willing to share. But the point is ultimately this company is doing everything possible to prevent wildfires and get ahead of the curve so that you as a customer do not have to endure wildfires, and it's much safer for you. Thank you. End of report.
Thank you, Barry. I really appreciate your being here. Two kind of quick questions, just as you were mentioning a couple of things. In those extreme fire weather days that Sarah was talking about before, kind of, I think you referenced the PSPS, but kind of what's the standard protocol on those extreme fire weather days in terms of what people could expect around power and turnoffs?
So we still look for the same things that you look for in red flag days and extreme wind, relative humidity, and fuels. But we have a 26-person top of the line weather team that monitors the weather 24 hours a day, especially when they start 10 days ahead of time. They're monitoring the changes and they're making decisions of what's going to happen. We also have an emergency operations center in Vacaville that stands up, and we have 15, 20 people in that room, and they're making decisions hour by hour to see whether or not we're going to shut off the power. We've also, unlike in the beginning where we shut off 2.1 million people, we've been able to reduce it down to microgrid, so we might affect only 15,000 people. And we also are able to minimize the amount of time because we have people that are constantly making these decisions based on what the weather is going to do. Most recently, we just had one here in the county, and it's always go, no go up to the hour. And mine in my particular area was delayed by 6 hours because that team determined that it was not ready to go.
Great, thank you. And then if people do have concerns about vegetation and power lines, report that. I know we often will kind of coordinate with you guys, but is there a way for residents to sort of say, hey, I've got this power line vegetation encroaching on the power line?
Yeah, so they can contact PG&E on the standard PG&E hotline, and they'll send a vegetation management crew out there. I've been on a couple of those, and we've been instrumental in removing vegetation that's going to fall into either transmission or distribution lines. Distribution being those that feed businesses and homes, and transmission being those that are mounted on the large lattice towers.
Great. Thank you. Well, thank you, Barry. Thanks for being here, and hopefully you can stick around for a few questions at the end if we get a few. But we really appreciate your partnership and also financial support for Berkeley Fire Safe Council and that vegetation removal that's happening. So thanks for being here. So we've talked about the Park District. We've talked about PG&E. There are a number of other really important partnerships. Many of them are volunteer-led that we want to talk about very quickly. Slide, Colin. You've probably heard about Firewise communities. Many of you are probably members of Firewise communities. These are local neighborhoods that are self-organizing neighbors and homeowners and renters around the importance of taking responsibility for the work you can do on your own properties. 2 years ago, Colin said, when there was last this sort of webinar, we had 9 Firewise communities. Now, 2 years later, we have 19 going on 21. We've basically covered from end to end, from north to south, the whole Berkeley Hills Ridge, Grizzly Peak Ridge, which is really amazing. And the work they're doing to organize neighbors, to kind of bring that community spirit to this problem is really impressive. We have some of the most active groups in the state, including an April 11th cleanup event that we'll talk about just a second. There's an alliance, the Berkeley Firewise Alliance. It's a network of those Firewise communities in the Berkeley Hills that's dedicated to creating even more of them. I'd like to give a special shout out as well to Help Berkeley, helpberkeley.org. Kwati is CEO and co-founder of Help Berkeley. It's a nonprofit. They're also helping residents with their defensible space work as Ember is getting underway. So next, some of the work that Firewise is doing, a couple of examples, and some of you participated in this, but they organized a Gates and Fences workshop in January that was attended by about 200 of us to introduce neighbors to vendors that provide non-combustible gates and fences and educate us on materials and costs so that we could meet some of the vendors, meet each other, and learn more about this. This is something that was completely formed and organized and pulled off by the Berkeley Fire Safety Council and by Firewise. Next, some of you may have also seen on a very rainy weekend an annual wildfire prevention cleanup day, also organized by the Firewise Alliance, supported by student volunteers from UC Berkeley and Diablo Valley College. Mayor Ishii and her Berkeley Corps more than 300 volunteers in 23 different sites that removed 10,000 pounds of leaf debris, 325 cubic yards of chippable vegetation, and 34 cubic yards of non-vegetation waste. I will say the rain made it even a little more fun, maybe, than normal, give us extra obstacles to try to navigate around, but it was a really great event, and it's something that they are now doing annually to bring us all together around some of these common needs and to help neighbors that may need a little extra assistance who can't do this work on their own. So those are just a couple of examples of that work. I also want to shout out the Berkeley Fire Safe Council. In the past 5 years, and next slide, the Fire Safe Council has focused awareness on the threat posed by blue gum eucalyptus, on those groves that are in and east of the city and the need to clean them up and remove some of those trees. They've led initial efforts to clean up the understory, which is the bottom parts of the trees, of the bark and the kind of detritus that collects underneath the trees that's extreme, especially when it's dry. They've, through their efforts and the efforts of volunteers, they've removed more than 100 tons of hazardous fuel in 4 years with community and student volunteers. They've removed 225 eucalyptus trees to date, with funds from community members, as well as some of that grant funding from PG&E we talked about before. They've also designed and implemented some of these hillside restoration projects in partnership with UC Berkeley's Department of Environmental Science and the Rotary Club. And they are strong supporters of what the fire department's doing and what the city is doing and what all of us are doing as part of Ember and all of our individual defensible space efforts. So thank you to Henry De Niro, the Berkeley Fire Safe Council president, who's been leading this volunteer-run nonprofit for several years, that is another really invaluable partner to this work. Next, so quick recap. I know we're a little behind, but we're going to try and catch up. About halfway through the main part of the agenda, we want to talk a little bit about finances, Station 4 insurance, and the fire code. And so this is just to orient on the first part. Now we're on to the last part, and then we'll do some Q&A. So quickly on finances, I think most people are aware, next slide, that there's a variety of programs available to help residents pay for and support the work that you are doing, that I am doing, that we are all doing around our own homes for defensible space and home hardening. The Resident Assistance Program at top right, it's funded by a $1 million CAL FIRE grant that is directly made available to homeowners who are either 65 plus and or below median income and or need just some extra physical assistance because they can't do the work themselves. Please, please, there are still funds remaining in this program. Please, please apply for this program. It is free money to help you remove vegetation and create more defensible space around your home. Zone 0, Zone 1, that's all kind of part of this project in the very high hazard, fire hazard severity zone. Home hardening mesh program also available to folks. This is mesh to cover gutter guards, the rain gutters, as well as to cover the vents where embers can get into your home and create a fire in an ember storm. This material is available for free from the fire department, so please take advantage of that effort. There is a new Gates and Fences Fund that is being stood up thanks to a very generous private anonymous donor. This is coming online and is going to help, again, homeowners in the very high zone remove and replace that 5 feet of fences and gates near the home with non-combustible gates and fences. We've heard from neighbors, we heard it over the past 12 to 18 months. This is often one of the most expensive things about doing vegetation management, and we've developed a program to help take that on firsthand. So again, that's another financial support program. Last thing I'll mention is there's a home hardening transfer tax rebate when you buy or sell a home. I want to call out again my predecessor, former Councilmember Susan Wengraf, initially. We've now rolled it out more broadly, which gives you, like we do with earthquake, if you apply transfer tax funds to home hardening, you can use that money to fund the home hardening instead of paying it to the city or to the county, part of that transfer tax. So these are all important programs. I will also say at the state level, Senator Ben Allen has authored a bill that's going to provide, hopefully, if signed by the governor and passed by the legislature, low-income loans for home hardening. Senator Allen's also running for insurance commissioner. If folks are just a shout out, but this is an important effort. Our city council unanimously endorsed this and has sent letters and is advocating to members of the legislature and to the governor to pass this because this would be really important for Berkeley, but other communities across the state. If you need any help with any of these programs, please reach out to my office. And as always, getting a home inspection from the fire department is often the first step to unlocking all of these sorts of financial supports. Next, very quickly, I know there's been a lot written recently and a lot of discussion on Fire Station 4 in the city budget. As we know, the city has, for the past 10 plus years, been facing a pretty significant structural deficit, which year after year we've solved with one-time funds. I thank the leadership of the mayor and city manager that we need to confront this and actually tackle the structural deficit once and for all. As part of that, there had been floated an idea, a proposal for closing Fire Station 4. Let me be perfectly clear. I do not support closing Station 4. I will oppose any budget that proposes to close Station 4. We all know, we're all on this call, that fire safety and emergency response are critically important to all of us living in the hills, and keeping these essential services in place is my top priority. I will say, fortunately, the latest proposal that we just reviewed from city staff Thursday night, largely as a result of the feedback we've gotten in the community that has spoken out very clearly on this, the latest budget does not include the closure of Station 4. So we want the station is going to remain operational for the next fiscal year through the use of one-time funding. We need to, again, keep that in the budget, and I'm committed to making that happen. We also need to make sure that for the long term, that's the case. So one of the things I'm focused on in the budget process is how do we continue to grow revenue in a sustainable way, which means stimulating business activity and creating more of a solid tax base, small businesses, startups coming off the UC Berkeley campus, unsticking some of the stalled housing development projects, which would mean property tax revenue and more residents here paying tax. We need to do a lot more of that work to grow the top line, which is going to help the budget long term. So while the city is facing these difficult financial realities, just to recap, I'm opposed to closing the station. We're not going to close the station, and we do need to close the structural deficit and put Berkeley on stronger financial footing, which I support, but we need to do it in the right way. And thank you for those of you who have spoken out so loudly on this issue. Next piece, insurance. It's not the blue screen, but it's insurance. One of the things I've really been excited about since the fire code changes and the new ordinance that we put in place last year is I've heard from so many residents about concerns about home insurance, how much it costs, whether it's available at all, people who are losing insurance. One of the reasons that the defensible space work that we're being all asked to do in the very high zone is so important is not only does it make it safer in an ember storm that we would expect to see from Tilden Park, but it also makes us more insurable. Since we passed Ember, we've had 4 or 5 different insurance companies either come here and visit, or we've had Zoom conversations with who are interested in learning what's happening here because they want to know, hey, is this an area that we can come back and do more work in? And I will say, at the result of every one of those conversations, folks are really excited about what's happening here in Berkeley. And again, I look, these are insurance companies, love them or hate them, right? We need it. Um, but I will say that a lot of these folks are traveling around the state. They're going to Marin County, they're going to Paradise, they're going to LA, they're seeing what's happening. And I think what they like about what's happening here in Berkeley is we are taking action as a community to put ourselves on firmer, resilient, wildfire resilient footing. We are going to make ourselves more insurable and safer. Just this week, Chief Arnold and I and my team hosted 7 members of the Mercury Insurance team. We showed them the work that the Park District is doing. We showed them the work that some of the individual homeowners are doing under Ember. We showed them the work that the fire department has done in terms of clearing evacuation routes or removing hazardous vegetation. And they were so excited. They're like, we basically want to come back into this market, and we think we can get people off the FAIR plan, and we can get people onto private insurance at a better price. Again, our whole mission here is to show people, educate people about what's happening, and invite as many insurers as possible back into the market. Competition here is good for all of us. But the good news is as we're embarking on this process, I think we're going to start seeing, can't promise when or how exactly, but we're going to start seeing this flywheel turning where if you do the defensible space work and you're part of a community that is committed to doing this defensible space work, insurers will feel better about coming and insuring us. But we've all talked to them. We need to see that happen because we need to know that if we're doing the defensible space work, we're getting a return on that investment and that insurance is coming back. So I'm committed to continuing to push this conversation. We can't legislate it. We can't set the policy, but we can be as cheerleaders as possible for the work that you all are doing and the city is doing and all of our partners are doing to make us more wildfire resilient so we can kind of close that loop when it comes to insurance and when it comes to the finances. So much more to come here. I'll have more to share. We're thinking about an insurance kind of workshop, many more materials about the companies that are interested in coming back to Berkeley and being part of the solution here. Again, we don't care about one or the other. We just want to make us all more insurable, and the early returns are very positive. Lastly, I want to hand it back to Assistant Chief Arnold to give us some other updates on the fire code and the early work that's been happening as a result of Ember. And Colin, I'll throw it back to you.
Thanks, Councilmember Blackaby. Yeah, it was I think, a pretty inspiring trip in terms of watching these folks sort of approach this community eyes wide open and watch them react to some of the work that they saw. I was really excited by their attitude and energy around this. I'm going to really quickly go through just what's going on here in terms of the fire code. There's no surprises here to this group. I think everybody is well aware of what we have been pursuing in this last year in terms of, we've looked at what's happening with the regional partners. We've looked at how we're slowing the spread of wildfire into our community and threatening our community. And then locally, we've talked aggressively about how do we make sure that when embers in our community, when wildfire is at our doorstep, how do we make sure we're prepared? Before I talk about some of the work that we're seeing out there, for those of you that have not been to our new website, I am not a website designer. I am still really proud of what our team put together. If you haven't been to berkeleyfiresafe.org this year, please visit it, if only to help us get credit for some of the hard work we put into it. One of the cool features of this new website is some of the feedback we got is that it's hard for folks to understand where they live in relation to the fire code and what's required. So on our website now, you can hop in there and immediately figure out what zone you live in based on the fire code. And it gives you personalized recommendations for what you need to do with your home, not only to meet code, but also best practices, as well as what services are available to you. Councilmember Blackaby mentioned the MESH program, the Residence Assistance Program. If you put in your address, it'll filter for what you're available for. So you've got access to all the public funds that hopefully we can offer you. Also on our website, Berkeley Fire Safe Berkeley Landscape Guide, thanks to the team that was put together at Councilmember Blackaby's direction last year after the fire code passed. One of the results of this was a guide that takes the fire code and turns it into best practice. So what is it that you can do around your home? Not just that meets code, but also meets what a lot of our Berkeley residents would consider beauty or natural vegetation around their homes, some best practices, some tools, some tricks. It's a great guide. It's available online. We don't have a lot of printed copies right now, but we're working on getting some more. We've also got an updated self-inspection checklist for those that take a look at this resident guide and say, I want a little bit more information. I want to know exactly what to do. I'm not quite ready to read the fire code. I don't blame you. It's not a fun document to read. But there is the self-inspection checklist that will get you partway there in terms of giving you really specific guidance about what to do based on where you live. Councilmember Blackaby mentioned this. I want to hit it again because this program will disappear at some point when either we run out of money or the grant expires. But we do have that residence assistance program from CAL FIRE. It's available to anyone who meets one of these qualifications. So you have to be over the age of 65 or be qualified as low income or be physically unable to do the work. You can, again, find this program through our website, berkeleyfiresafe.org. The funding has so far provided us with the opportunity to bring every home that we've encountered into full compliance. So please take advantage of this program. It's a great way to get yourself into compliance and to help make your home prepared for wildfire. One other thing that recent development is in a partnership with the University of California Agricultural and Natural Resources, along with UC Davis and the UC Cooperative Extension. They are hosting a 3-part webinar for professional landscapers in terms of fire safe practices. I know there's a number of semi-professional landscapers on this call, if not professionals. It's a great opportunity to participate in this series and get trained up on what the standards are for best practices for landscaping on private property around homes. That QR link is there on the website. It'll also be available afterwards. Briefly about our 2026 inspections, we have been coaching residents since July of 2025. We have been booked up with inspections since January 1 of 2026. There's a lot of folks that have been interested in being inspected. Some of those are just for their own edification. Some of those are participating in programs. I think everybody here, I would assume, can agree that those inspections have been based on, gearing our residents towards manageable chunks of work year by year, so that any given year we're dealing with the highest risk issues, but not necessarily tackling everything that has to be done for homes that have a lot of work to do. This also helps facilitate financial assistance through the Residence Assistance Program. And I would say for those of you that are struggling to take the first step or wondering how to engage with this process and becoming resilient to wildfire, the best way to do that is just engage with us. We're setting up inspections now. We can find a convenient time to come talk to you. Come June and July, we will be canvassing the neighborhood and starting to knock on doors. But we really want to prioritize FaceTime with you. It doesn't do us a lot of good to just do an inspection from the street. We want to work with you to connect you with all of those resources. So please visit the website for more information on that. Last but not least, I said this last year, I'm really excited about what's happening in these hills. You give the citizens of Berkeley a challenge in terms of the fire code, and they come up with some really amazing creative solutions in terms of how to both protect their home and engage with their neighbors. And we've seen some really cool stuff. I don't know that I ever would have seen a glass fence before that would have been fire resilient, but there's some neighbors up there that found a way to do this. So some really cool stuff that up there in the neighborhood. Sometimes you have to look closely to figure out how a home has found a way to be compliant. But a lot of folks have done it in some creative ways, and I've had to sort of do a double take as I drove by, going, "Wait a minute, that home's fully compliant," and they found a way to do it by just touching one or two things. So looks awesome out there. Really well done. Last piece, we had one wildfire alternate means and measures request up on the website for a while. We've got a few more now. So for those of you that are interested in trying to do additional work to maintain a single specimen of tree or maybe some vegetation close to the home that wouldn't necessarily qualify under the code, please take a look at the website. There's some examples there of some homeowners that have found ways to meet the same practical effect of the fire code by doing some additional work. There's one of the things we've discovered through this process is there's sort of a standard checklist for small and medium-sized trees that might not be qualified under the existing code. Our inspector team has worked to identify a series of steps that allows those trees in some ways to be maintained in a way that qualifies them to not be removed. So we're learning a lot about this process as we go. If you do have something special around your home or something that you really do want to try to keep, we are interested in trying to work with you to accomplish the goal of meeting the same practical effect. All of this information is on the website. If you're not getting the information you want on the website, please email us at wildfire@berkeleyca.gov. The team is ready and standing by, not tonight, but they will be in the morning, to help connect you with these resources. Again, amazed by the amount of work that's happened so far in this community, excited by some of the partners' work around us. Also really excited what Councilmember Blackaby has done in terms of connecting other resources around the state to start to see what's happening in Berkeley. I'm cautiously optimistic that we are on our way towards really reducing the risk of loss from wildfire in this community, which would be could be amazing. So, Councilmember Blackaby, thank you for giving us the time tonight. Yeah, I want to thank both Sarah, Lana, and Chief Sprague for being here tonight to support this, and then thanks for putting this together with the community.
Thank you. Thanks for being here, Colin. I want to thank Lori and Hannah from my team also from kind of the organization and making this whole thing happen. Really quickly before we jump into Q&A, I do want to just double click on that. I love, by the way, the acronym WAMR. That might be the best thing about the wild, because I can't remember wildfire alternate means and measures, but WAMR I can remember. I just want to look. This was something as we were going through the discussion about Ember. We know what the science says in terms of it's really important to have that 5-foot non-combustible zone around a house. One thing we haven't talked about tonight is, thanks to the work that is happening in the Park District and some of the natural geographies about Wildcat Canyon Road and Lake Anza, it's unlikely that our first contact with a wildfire is going to be a fire that just sort of roars out of the park and on the ground and continues into the hills. What we're going to be faced with are these wind-blown embers that are blowing into people's rooftops and along the sides of their homes. And that's why we know it's difficult. The transition is difficult. It's also something the state is going to expect all of us to do. And we felt like this is the responsible thing to do. But that aside, we know we also live in an area where people have invested a lot of time and effort in landscaping and very beautiful landscapes and very beautiful homes. So one of the things I'm really proud about in terms of the citizens work group that got to work was hammering out a process where we need to be able to review and consider how do we adapt? And if you've got that beautiful tree, are there things that you do around the siding of the home, around the windows of the home, under the eaves of the home, around the base of that tree, extending out farther than you might otherwise do to be able to save it? You live on a hillside with a slope, you have drainage concerns. Like there are very specific circumstances that there's the code, and then there's the very specific circumstances that we all face. So this WAMR process was something that the citizens work group really worked on. I think I saw Richard Ilgan and Margaret also on the call tonight. They were two members of that group. Eric Weaver might be on, I'm not sure. But this is a result of that. And so please do talk to the fire department if you've got a concern, a question, and let's then try and figure out a way to kind of meet the code and meet the impact of the code, which is making your house more resilient, but also preserve and protect some of those things that you care about. And that is something we heard loud and clear in the process, and we're really trying to work for. So let's go into Q&A. We've got thanks to the fast fingers of Chief Sprague. I know he's already answered a bunch of these in, and Chief maybe can also pop in if we have a few more of these questions. If you do have questions, please type them in the Q&A function. We've got a few queued up here that we can start with. Maybe we'll start with Greg Murphy had asked a question about, I like tightening the criteria for declaring extreme fire weather, but are there any examples of catastrophic fires that happen with less wind and humidity than what you're targeting? Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, go ahead, Sarah.
Oh, sure. So if you dive into the details, there are always outlier examples, but the answers are pretty complex. They depend on when you're measuring, the humidity and the wind, exactly where you're measuring them. So what we're really trying to do here is to take the fire department out of the decision-making process and to leave the interpretation of weather to the National Weather Service. One of the things that I didn't mention, because we had such a long agenda, was that since we started in 2018 with this extreme fire weather definition, our local weather service has introduced a new product, so a new way of describing weather hazards that's called particularly dangerous situation. The nomenclature is terrible, but what it means is they're looking at something that they want to declare the worst of the worst kind of red flag weather. So we're going to be leaning into the expertise of the meteorologists at the Weather Service to make those decisions instead of trying to kind of do it on our own with that chart like I showed it to you before.
Thanks. Another question. Jonathan Frisch asks, how is the Berkeley Police Department protecting neighborhoods who are expected to leave early from looters and other opportunists? In the last event, there was no evidence of a police presence and it was a very public announcement. I have some thoughts, but I'd love you guys to answer that.
Sure. So if we're looking at an extreme fire weather situation, then what we're talking about is an emergency operations center activation. We're talking about patrols of the Berkeley Hills, both by volunteers with our NALCO Aries team, our hand radio operators, as well as firefighters, as well as police officers. Part of the Emergency Operations Center activation has to do with ensuring that all the departments are working, in the same sheet of music. And, I would be lying to say that the staffing challenges affecting law enforcement in Berkeley don't have some impact here, but it's absolutely the intention of our law enforcement partners to be providing that additional site security, because we recognize that that's a huge concern for people to be able to comfortably leave their homes. So our process is, if we have extreme fire weather, then we are working hand in hand with the police department to be providing this extra patrols. And that's the name of the game.
Great. I was just saying, if there's more we need to do from a policy perspective to help make that happen. I know I've talked to Chief Lewis about that as well, but it's really important that if we're asking people to leave, that they know that they're leaving in good hands. So I appreciate that work.
Do you mind, Councilmember Blackaby, could I add one other thing in?
Please do.
So
please do.
One of the other benefits, I think, to the updates that we're making to our structure for extreme fire weather, you saw how that map of the area that we're asking to leave early is really shrinking. So, you can do a lot more in a smaller area with the same amount of resources. So I would expect that you'd probably see more than you have seen in the past for future extreme fire weather events.
Thanks, Sarah. Another question came up about undergrounding. So thanks for jumping back on, Barry. And I wanted to highlight, you mentioned earlier that there's actually 178 residences along Grizzly Peak, Senior Avenue, Summit Road, and Avenida Drive that are currently midway, and actually I think towards the end of a pretty long undergrounding process. But if there was a prioritization of other parts of Berkeley, or at least along Grizzly Peak Boulevard, was the question. I mean, I know it's expensive and I know the timeline for that is long, but how do you think about prioritizing, and are there any chances the next kind of period of years we could look at more of Grizzly Peak or other parts of Berkeley?
So I'm not 100% certain how the team that sets up undergrounding works. That's a whole separate entity in and of itself. I don't have insight into that, and they're very, very careful about just allowing someone like me or anyone else who's not a part of the team disseminate information because it might be incomplete, it could be misconstrued, and it can just, to coin a phrase, start a wildfire that would be difficult to put out.
Yeah. I think that's why also I think at this point, I mean, it's the PSPS, it's the cutting of power in extreme weather days that's sort of the answer, and these other technologies that you're using to monitor the lines. Because to be honest, it's again, we all would love to have the power lines undergrounded. That is a long and expensive undertaking, and we need to find other ways to have the same effect, which is what I think the PSPS basically accomplishes on those high weather, high fire days. Thanks for that. A couple of
Sure.
questions. Yeah, go ahead. A couple of questions from Craig Wall and Michael Henry, looking for a little more information on the Gates and Fences program. How do I apply? Craig said the gate and fence assistance would be great. Just for 2 gates and 3 foot section of fence, I'm looking at quotes of 7,000 plus. Um, Colin, you want to talk a little bit more about gates and fences and how that's going to work?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. We are the Gates and Fences program sort of went into a beta test mode about a month or so ago. We wanted to work out some of the details. It's sort of complicated in terms of the number of partners we have to engage with in terms to make sure we get reimbursed through that really generous private donor. So I know we were just reviewing some of the final steps in terms of making sure there was no delay in reimbursing folks. Last week. I am hopeful that we'll have that program up in the very near future under the programs page of our website at berkeleyfiresafe.org. As soon as it's available, that's where it will pop up. And then Councilmember Blackaby, as soon as we're confident that that program is ready to support folks, I'm sure we'll also be reaching out to you so that you can push it out to folks as well.
Great, thank you. Here's another ember-related question from Rachel Schiff. Have there been erosion studies that evaluate the impact of clearing trees and flammable material, particularly around slopes?
That's a great question. In terms of, I think it's important to point out that with the fire code, it's fairly rare to have to remove mature trees, and the root structure of mature trees are a big part of surface erosion. When it comes to the erosion that we're talking about, the zone zero around the first 5 feet of a structure because of the foundation of that structure, there have not been studies that have identified that there's a significant erosion risk in terms of clearing immediately around the structure. So we don't have any evidence of that. We're also prohibited from requiring removal in terms where erosion would in fact be a factor. So I don't know if that answers the question or not.
Well, and I think it's also, I guess, where the whammer comes into. I don't know, but look, if you're on a hillside, have significant erosion concerns, let's find another way to, meet the requirements that aren't going to make the erosion problem worse on your property, the slope problem worse. And that's also, I think, where a whammer would come in.
Yeah, I don't get to correct a council member very often, but I will correct you
Please
there.
correct me.
It's
Please
that
correct
actually
me.
wouldn't be a whammer. That would be a variance of the fire code. So
Got it.
if you've got evidence that removing that vegetation would create an erosion challenge for the home, so if you got a soils engineer that is basically demonstrated through a report that removing that vegetation would pose a risk to the home or erosion of surface soils, that then becomes a variance of the code. You're absolutely right. Still engage with us. We will work with you to figure out what that solution looks like to meet both the erosion challenge and the fire code challenge. But it does start with having a qualified soils engineer that can demonstrate the erosion risk, and it would be a variance, not a whammer. It's a complicated code for sure. But either way, send us an email.
Great. Well, I'll kind of spontaneously ask, it kind of goes back to the inspection process and then working with the department, which is, we know a lot of these things are going to take time. Like no one is expecting that you're going to sort of decide, okay, here's what I'm going to do and turn that around overnight. Like, it's taking me quite a bit of time just as I'm doing it around my own home. I've got all the wire mesh and I'm starting to do that implementation. I've started to trim trees. I've started to clear mulch from the front yard, but I've got more work to do to get the gravel down. And there's stuff to do. But it speaks to the piece of this, which is like there's an expectation this is probably going to be as you work with any individual homeowner, a several year process, a plan, where each year you're kind of doing more and more until you get to the end goal. And maybe can you talk a little bit about how you see that working through the inspections you've done and these plans that you've put together so far with homeowners?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. It follows the same process we've used in years past, which is that when we meet with homeowners, we pick the highest risk issues and we start there. That usually involves immediately around the home. It's often dry leaves. It's often a couple pieces of vegetation that are especially high risk. And then what we've put in place this year is a planning section in the inspection report. So we identify a couple of high risk issues that we do want you to deal with in the next 60 days. We work with the homeowner to understand where they're at, so that we're not overloading them with, if they have a landscaper coming in the next 3 weeks and they're flush with cash, hey, let's get this job done. But that's not most folks. So we identify a few issues, and then everything else goes in the planning section for the following years. And we put in there, hey, these are the other violations that we would like you to deal with next year and the year after that. I think I'm a homeowner. I totally respect that the vegetation around your home has a lot of value for folks. Sometimes it's got real value in terms of watching your kids grow up around some of these trees. Sometimes it's just a plant that you really like that you want to transplant in the off season. I'd be pissed if someone came to my front door and said this all has to go now, and that's absolutely not our goal and not what our inspectors do. So when you engage with that process, if you're not going through the residence assistance program, you're going to go on your own. Our inspectors will work with you to figure out, to triage the highest risk issues and then develop a plan. And for some folks, that can be up to 3 years. It can take a while. Some folks are almost there too, I gotta say. But
No,
for folks that have a lot of work to do, I don't know where you fall on the spectrum yet, but
yeah, I'm not the slow. It's taking me a little time, but we're getting there. And I will say it was as we drove around yesterday with the Mercury Insurance folks, and you were pointing out. I mean, it is every week you either you see more work that's happening, you see neighbors that are, there's a truck of gravel. They're getting ready to prepare. They're moving fences. They're removing gates. I mean, like it's happening bit by bit, and
Mhm.
and that sort of incremental approach where just start with something. Start with a small step, and that will lead to the next step. I'm trying to chronicle my process through a Substack blog, but it's just we're all in this together. No, we're not going to get there overnight, but if we all start and get moving, we will get there sooner rather than later. And I think and the sooner we start, the sooner we get to the goal. We just know it's not going to be overnight.
Yeah,
Um,
we'll see.
Linda Friedman asked, and this is related, I would like to address the inspection procedures, especially as it relates to what is inspected and what parts of a home's property are inspected. Can you talk about front yard, backyard? What are you looking for? What's the scope of the inspection?
Sure. All four sides of a home are vulnerable. We know in these high wind events, based on both the wind and the topography around the home, that regardless of where the fire is initially coming from, because the spotting from embers can happen anywhere around the home, all four sides are vulnerable. It doesn't do us or a resident any good to work on just one side of the home. And our goal since July of last year has been to work hard to engage with residents to find a way to work with them to get around all four sides of the home. It is important. It's important from a fire safety standpoint. And what we want to look at from each of those four sides is the resiliency of the home. So for any home built prior to 2017, which is almost all of our homes, they don't meet the current wildfire standards in terms of new construction, and that's okay. That's an expensive proposition, but I don't think we need to meet that to mitigate risk. What we're really looking for are simple solutions. The mesh on the vents and gutters is a big part of that. And then we're also looking at vegetation around the home. So those first 5 feet are critical on all four sides of the home to make sure there's nothing in those first 5 feet that is combustible that's in the ground. If you have a deck, it involves the combustibility around that deck. We include that deck in a part of the home, and we look for 5 feet around that. Those first 5 feet are really what prevent fire from spreading from your yard all the way to your home. And it's also what prevents embers from bouncing off your home, landing on the ground, and then igniting what's on the ground around you. Outside of that first 5 feet, what we're really looking for is mitigating some of the larger fuel loads that can generate flame lengths that will impact your home. So when fuel burns, it generates flame lengths 2 to 3 times the height of that fuel. And so under windy conditions, you take that 2 or 3 times and you bend it sideways. That's what we're looking for. So we're really trying to start to mitigate fuel packages around the home and work with you to develop strategies to start to separate that fuel in a process and a timeline that works for you to help make your home resilient to wildfire.
Great. Thanks. One last one, and then we can wrap up. Karen Weinstein asks, and I know this is a common question we get, but questions about street parking. It's kind of part of the evacuation process. I would argue there's sort of evacuation for wildfires and very huge community-wide events. There's also issues around street parking for just day-to-day egress and ingress of getting fire trucks and ambulances in and out of the hills. But can you talk a little bit? I think this is a continues. It's an open issue. I know we need to do more and do better on this front, but we can talk a little bit about. Yeah, one of the things we did is say, hey, on extreme weather days, we want to make sure that all of the red curbs are cleared, like that at a minimum, and we need to figure out how to operationalize that. But beyond that, can you talk about kind of street parking and narrow streets?
So yeah, we need to be really careful about looking at the specific problems that we're trying to solve. We all recognize that there are huge problems just with day-to-day getting around the hills and emergency responder access to day-to-day emergencies. We were surprised to find, but then ultimately understood the challenges around creating additional capacity in the hills for evacuation. So when we think about evacuation, we're thinking about a huge demand on the roadway going just one direction. And what the experts essentially explained to us is that unless you can create a consistent additional lane of roadway from the starting point where you're trying to evacuate all the way to the end point, then if you have any interruptions, whether they are from an intersection that has just one lane or any kind of natural pinch points in the roadway with or without parking, just based on the hill's topography, then you're not going to actually increase, I should say, improve evacuation times. Where we're focusing right now is looking at if there's an opportunity to, on the larger roadways in the Berkeley Hills, identify ways that we can do some selective parking restrictions to create that lane of roadway for responders to get in while we have a lot of people coming out. And that's in process at this point. But really our best recommendations to everyone is that we know that the roadways are not going to support a mass evacuation with or without more parking restrictions. And so we really want to focus our energy on the places where we can make people safer. And that is in being ready for extreme fire weather and knowing what you're going to do, making those plans. And we also want to keep looking at those pinch points for day-to-day emergencies, but solving those day-to-day emergencies is not actually going to speed up your trip out.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. I know we're almost at time. There were two other questions that came up that are related that I do want to just knock out before we go, because these are really important, and we do hear about these. It's from Zora and from Michael Walden. Where there are differences between Berkeley's Ember program and the emerging state plan, because again, at long last, after many years, the State Board of Forestry looks like their Zone Zero rules are coming together. Question is Berkeley planning any plan modifications, thinking about the timing of implementation and whether or not you relax some of the planting requirements? I just want to start in this really quick and then kick it to the chief. One of the things I know we committed to, we have this vegetation management work group, the citizens work group. These rules are not yet finalized. We're waiting to see what finally comes and emerges, and we're still probably a few months away from that. I think it's important that the community see them, talk about the rules, get the work group together to kind of hash it out, work with the fire department team, and kind of decide and look at, like, as a department, and make recommendations back to the city council, like what adjustments, if any, should be made. I will just say, kind of as I'm kind of observing it, um, and I've been, we're in touch with and we hear from what's happening in that process quite a bit. That the intention here is that these rules are a floor, not a ceiling. They've been very explicit in the process that, like, they expect that local jurisdictions are going to make adjustments to fit local conditions. And I will say that in Berkeley, like, we do have very specific local conditions. We've just been talking about how difficult it is to evacuate the hills. We know it's very difficult to evacuate the hills. We know our city and the distances between structures are very narrow, such that when one house catches on fire, two, three, four, five, whatever, are in jeopardy, which is very different than other parts of the state where you can have a zone zero, zone one, and zone two, and one house ignites, and then that house is in danger, but not the whole neighborhood. Well, here, the whole neighborhood's in danger once one home goes up with a roaring wind in dry conditions. Um, so we do have very specific local conditions. So I'll just say from my perspective, yeah, we're going to look at what the state does, and if we can make some adjustments and need to make adjustments, we will. I'll say through the WAMR process, we've already been handling a lot of those, which is trying to make some kind of customizations that we can make. But we're also being encouraged by the state to sort of do what needs to be done locally. So I'll start with that, but I don't know if Chiefs, if you have anything you'd want to add to that process as we observe what the state's doing.
I think that's well said. It's a common question. I think your comment about bringing the work group back together, if and or when we see finalized recommendations from the state, is an important part of that conversation. And I don't want to speak for that work group ahead of time. I will say that the fire code that we have today is based on local modifications from the state code from last year. The fire code of the future will be based on local modifications from the state code as it releases down the road. We are in this sort of middle ground where the state has hinted that they have recommendations. Call me a cynic. They've been hinting since 2023. And so if and when we have those recommendations, I do look forward to coming back into that process and re-engaging with the group. I think you hit the nail on the head, which is that we want to make sure that we're taking the state language, we're adopting it to local conditions where possible. You pointed out that the WAMRs, I don't know of another organ or another jurisdiction that is looking at local conditions down to 2 or 3 feet around a structure. I'm really proud of what Inspector Fagoni has done and the rest of our team. But yeah, I think we're open to anything. We're open to reviewing facts when we have them. Until then, I think we're sort of following along with everybody else and watching this process play out.
Yeah, and I think, look, I'm proud that, we couldn't wait, in the sense that, like, we know this risk is real and we know the direction we need to move in, which is why we've started moving, and it's going to take time. That's why we needed to start, because it will take time to get to the goal. And the sooner we start, the sooner we get to the end, and we will learn and adjust along the way. And we've been very open and clear about that. And as more research is there, more science is there, as we learn how to refine it, let's refine it. And I think we're all very open and interested in doing that to make this work. Um, Thank you. So one, I just want to thank Barry. Thank you for being here for PG&E. Thank you for being a part of this. Sarah, thank you for being a part of this and helping us understand the evacuation study and how we're learning about evacuation. Chief Sprague, Chief Arnold, thank you as well for being here and for all your leadership and expertise as we navigate this together. Any closing words from you guys before we close out?
Thanks a lot for having us. I really appreciate the time. I work with an amazing team here, both on behalf of Sarah and Chief Sprague. And yeah, and Barry, thank you for being here tonight as well.
Great.
Thanks for having me.
Great. And please be in touch with our office. If you need to reach the wildfire time, it's wildfire@berkeleyca.gov is the email for wildfire. Wildfire@berkeleyca.gov. The website is firesafeberkeley.org, and that's links to inspections.
It's berkeleyfiresafe.org.
I do that every time. berkeleyfiresafe.org, links to materials, inspections. And please reach out to my office, bblackaby@berkeleyca.gov, if we can also be of assistance as you navigate. Thank you for everyone who joined us. We'll be making this available to people who weren't able to join, and look for lots more materials in your email that were referenced in the call tonight. So thanks, everybody. Have a great evening, and we'll talk soon.
Good night.
Good night.